What if everything you were ever taught about the pyramids was a carefully constructed lie? Not a misunderstanding, not a gap in knowledge, a lie. For over 4,000 years, the Great Pyramid of Giza has stood at the edge of the desert, silent and enormous, the last of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing. Textbooks call it a tomb. Documentaries call it a monument to death and the afterlife. Generations of historians have nodded along. But here's what nobody told you. There was never a body inside. And now, Grok AI, one of the most powerful artificial intelligence systems ever applied to archaeological data, has torn that story apart at the seams. What it found beneath the surface, inside the walls, and buried under the foundation of this ancient structure, isn't just surprising. It's deeply, deeply unsettling. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to look at the pyramids in a way you never have before. Let's start at the beginning. The conventional story about the Great Pyramid goes something like this. Around 2560 BCE, the Pharaoh Khufu commanded an army of workers to build him the ultimate monument to his own greatness. A tomb so massive and so perfectly constructed that his soul would be guaranteed safe passage into the afterlife. And that story makes sense on the surface. Ancient Egyptians were obsessed with death, or, more accurately, with what came after death. Their entire spiritual framework revolved around 2 components of the soul: the Ka, the life force, and the Ba, the personality. For a pharaoh to achieve immortality, his body had to be preserved. His tomb had to be grand, and the stars overhead had to serve as a map guiding him upward into the cosmos. The pyramids, in this version of history, are the ultimate expression of funerary ambition. Except, here's the problem. Walk into the king's chamber, the very heart of the Great Pyramid, and what do you find? No gold, no painted hieroglyphs, no prayers, no instructions for the afterlife, no carvings of Osiris or Anubis. Every royal tomb Egypt has ever produced, from Tutankhamun's legendary burial to the elaborate underground palace of Seti I, is covered in art, text, and ritual objects. They are visual encyclopedias of the Egyptian afterlife. The king's chamber is completely, utterly bare. Smooth granite walls, nothing else. In the center sits a rough-hewn granite sarcophagus. No lid, no inscriptions, no decoration. Engineers have noted that the sarcophagus is actually wider than the passages leading into the chamber. It had to have been placed during construction. Nobody was ever meant to carry a body in there after the fact. And perhaps, most damning of all, no mummy has ever been found inside the Great Pyramid. Not a fragment of bone, not a shred of linen, nothing. So if it wasn't a tomb, what was it? This is where the story gets extraordinary. Researchers recently fed an enormous data set into Grok AI, one of the most sophisticated artificial intelligence systems available today, and gave it a task that no human archaeologist could accomplish alone: analyze the Great Pyramid from scratch, without cultural assumptions, without the weight of academic tradition, and without the unconscious bias that comes from growing up in a world where everyone already knows the pyramids are tombs. The AI processed ground-penetrating radar scans, gravity measurements, spectral material analyses, astronomical data, hydrological surveys, and thousands of pages of archaeological records. It cross-referenced ancient construction techniques with modern physics, and it found things that had been hiding in plain sight for 4,000 years. First, the precision. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with a deviation of just 0.05 degrees. Its base, covering 5 full hectares, is leveled to within a few centimeters. These are not the tolerances of a burial project. These are the tolerances of an instrument, a device. something that needed to point in a specific direction and hold that orientation with almost supernatural accuracy. Then there are the shafts. 2 narrow channels run from the king's chamber straight through the pyramid's body to the exterior. 2 more run from the queen's chamber, but stop abruptly behind sealed limestone doors fitted with small copper handles. For years, scholars called these ventilation shafts. Grok AI flagged an immediate problem with that explanation. The shafts from the queen's chamber don't actually connect to the outside. They serve no ventilation function whatsoever. So what are they? The AI traced the angular paths of the king's chamber shafts and found something remarkable. The southern shaft points with extraordinary precision toward Orion's belt, the constellation the ancient Egyptians identified with Osiris. The northern shaft locks onto Alpha Draconis, the pole star of Khufu's era. To maintain these celestial alignments required an almost incomprehensible level of engineering knowledge, calculated and executed across the entire 146-meter height of the structure. These aren't spiritual gestures carved into stone. These are optical sighting tubes, directional waveguides, components of a machine. In 2017, a project called Scan Pyramids made headlines around the world when it used muon tomography, a technique borrowed from particle physics, to peer inside the Great Pyramid without touching it. What they discovered stunned the scientific community. A previously unknown void, stretching at least 30 meters in length, hovering directly above the Grand Gallery. Nobody knew what it was. The conventional explanation? A construction anomaly, a relieving chamber. Nothing to worry about. Grok AI looked at the same data and arrived at a very different conclusion. The geometry, the position, the relationship of this void to the granite chambers below. It doesn't look like an architectural accident. It looks like a resonance chamber, a carefully shaped space designed to behave in a specific way when exposed to vibration or sound. And then there's what's underneath. During the era of the pyramid's construction, a branch of the Nile, what geologists call the Khufu branch, ran alongside the Giza Plateau. Surveys of the bedrock beneath the pyramid have identified ancient subsurface channels and water features. Grok AI's analysis suggests that water wasn't just used to transport the enormous limestone and granite blocks to the construction site. Water was an operational element of the pyramid itself. Flowing water produces pressure. Pressure, applied to the right kind of stone, produces something remarkable. Here is where we need to talk about rocks, specifically about granite. The king's chamber, and the series of so-called relieving chambers stacked above it, are constructed entirely from red granite, transported from the Aswan quarries, over 800 kilometers to the south. 43 ceiling beams, 80 walls, hundreds of massive blocks, some weighing up to 70 tons, precisely fitted together. Why granite? Why drag this specific stone such an enormous distance when perfectly good limestone was available on site? Grok AI's answer: because this granite is loaded with quartz crystals, in some samples more than 55% quartz by composition. And quartz is not an ordinary mineral. Quartz is piezoelectric. Apply mechanical pressure to quartz, and it generates an electrical charge. Subject it to vibration, and it resonates, producing electromagnetic fields. This is not fringe science. It is the foundational principle behind every quartz watch, every ultrasound machine, and every sonar system on the planet. The ancient Egyptians, whether they understood the mechanism or not, had built a structure that turns physical pressure and vibration into energy. Here's how the system works, according to Grok AI's model. Millions of tons of stone bear down on the granite chambers. Beneath the pyramid, ancient water channels carry flow and fluctuation, generating subtle seismic pulses that travel upward through the bedrock. The quartz crystals in the granite respond. They vibrate. They generate fields. The resonance void above amplifies these effects. The shafts direct them outward, toward the stars, or inward, concentrating energy in specific spaces. The result? Inside the king's chamber in the Grand Gallery, the pyramid generates infrasound, low-frequency vibrations at approximately 19 Hz, too deep for human ears to consciously detect. And 19 Hz is not a random number. Modern acoustic research has demonstrated that this specific frequency does something extraordinary to the human body. It resonates with the eyeballs, causing visual disturbances, flashes of light, dark shapes at the edges of perception. It activates brain regions associated with fear, with awe, with emotional overwhelm. It can induce trance states, feelings of dissociation, the uncanny sensation of being watched, or the overwhelming conviction that something divine is present in the room. The pyramid doesn't just produce a sensation, it manufactures a spiritual experience. Think about what this means. The pharaoh descends into the king's chamber. He settles into the granite sarcophagus at the precise acoustic focal point of the system. Outside, tens of thousands of people gather beneath the pyramid's original surface. Not the rough, eroded limestone we see today, but polished Tura limestone casing stone so reflective they blazed like white fire in the desert sun. Ancient writers described the pyramid as visible from hundreds of miles away. It was the single most visually overwhelming object on the face of the earth. Inside, the machine activates. Infrasound fills the chamber. The pharaoh undergoes something, an experience beyond ordinary consciousness. Outside, the crowd feels it too, a low thrum in the chest, in the eyes, in the bones. Awe floods through them. Not symbolic awe, not the kind you feel looking at a beautiful painting. Biological awe, neurological awe, their bodies are responding. In that moment, the pharaoh does not claim to be a god. He is a god, in the most immediate and visceral sense every human being around him can experience. Grok AI's conclusion is stark. The Great Pyramid was not built to serve a religion. It was built to create one. It was a technology of deification, an engineered system for manufacturing the divine status of its operator through direct manipulation of human neurology. It was, in the most chilling possible sense, the world's first instrument of mass mind control. Here's what makes this discovery even more haunting. The ancient Egyptians documented everything. We have papyri recording grocery lists, workers' wages, legal disputes over fields, letters complaining about lazy servants. Their record-keeping was meticulous and exhaustive. There is not a single surviving text that describes how the Great Pyramid actually works. No blueprints, no technical manuals, no priestly records explaining the acoustic system, the resonance chambers, the piezoelectric effect of quartz under pressure. Nothing. Grok AI interprets this absence not as a gap in the historical record, but as evidence of deliberate suppression. This knowledge was not for everyone. It was the most powerful secret in the ancient world, the secret of how to become a god, and it was held by a tiny inner circle of priests and royal architects. When the Old Kingdom collapsed, when the pharaonic system that depended on this technology crumbled under economic strain and internal revolt, the secret died with it. The machine was abandoned, and it has been sitting there, dormant ever since. Here's the thing that should keep you up tonight. The machine is still there. Centuries of looting stripped away the polished limestone casing. Time and tourism have worn the surface. But beneath it all, the millions of tons of quartz-rich granite, precisely stacked and aligned, the resonance chambers, sealed and undisturbed, the subsurface water features still present in the bedrock. The core of the system remains essentially intact. The Great Pyramid is not a ruin. It is a dormant machine, waiting. Grok AI's analysis raises questions that archaeologists, physicists, and ethicists are only beginning to grapple with. Do we try to understand this system fully? Do we attempt to replicate its effects? Do we want to know what it feels like to stand inside an ancient device specifically engineered to override rational thought and replace it with involuntary religious terror? Or are there doors that are better left closed? The pyramids have always been described as monuments to human ambition, and they are. But Grok AI has revealed which kind of ambition built them, not the ambition to achieve greatness, or to survive death, or to touch the stars. The ambition to control other human beings so completely that they cannot tell the difference between a man and a god. 4,000 years later, that machine is still standing, and it still works. If this video made you think, hit subscribe, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share this with someone who needs to have their mind blown. Because we're just getting started.